This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media accounts, my columns at the Colorado Springs Independent, my other podcasts that I've done. I think this one's going to be like number 332 or something like that. I don't know. It's a whole bunch of podcasts. Anyway, those are all going to be available at hikingbob.com. Also, you can drop me a line if you have a question, a comment, a suggestion. We're always happy to hear those, so drop me a line there and let me know what your thoughts are, any comments you have, or anything like that. Always like to hear those. We get a lot of suggestions from listeners as to who to have on the podcast or topics to discuss. And I know we have some of those that are still waiting. We're going to get to those pretty soon. But today we're going to continue with our series on organizations that are part of the Pikes Peak Give campaign. And today I have Becky Lineweber, who is the Executive Director of the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. If you've listened to the podcast before, no doubt you've heard Becky on here. She's a regular guest. But today we're going to catch up with Becky and then talk about the Give. So hi, Becky.
Good morning, Bob.
Hi. Nice to have you back on here and talk about PPORA. There's a lot been going on. I attend as many of the meetings as I can. Yeah. I was kind of negligent a little bit for a while there. I missed some meetings, but I always catch up with the emails and everything. But let's start off with the basics. Tell us what PPORA is all about.
Sure. So like you said, we stand for the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance, and Alliance is the key part of that. We are a collaboration, and we're a collaborative of outdoor nonprofits, outdoor businesses, land managers, and enthusiasts. So if you think about what our organization is, we're kind of the big tent. So we try to bring all those parties together, a lot of which you've interviewed. So a lot of our specific partners are on this podcast quite a bit. But we try to come together to work to strengthen the outdoor recreation for this region, for the Pikes Peak region. And we consider that El Paso, Teller, and Fremont counties loosely.
Okay. And it's a pretty unique organization. There's not a lot of these kind of groups where you're bringing the business side of things, the nonprofit side of things, the volunteer side of things, and then the land manager side of things all together into one group where everybody sits around a table and talks to each other. That's kind of rare, isn't it?
It's rare. I think it's really important. I think when we formed, you never know what your organization is going to look like. And we started looking at us as a business group and quickly, like in the first week, found out that we needed to be a bigger group to include all of the different aspects of the outdoors. Our outdoors, this industry is just really unique in that our infrastructure for outdoor businesses is our outdoor lands, our public lands. And so to not have land managers at the table, to not have nonprofits who help care for that, steward the land, conserve the land, didn't make sense to us. So we know that, across Colorado and across the nation, there are a lot of different groups, different kinds of coalitions, and they're all formed for different reasons. And there's nothing wrong with business groups. There's nothing wrong with nonprofit groups. But for our purposes, we just felt like we really needed all of those voices at the table.
We've talked a lot. There's been a lot published about the economic impact of outdoor recreation, not only in Colorado, which is huge, and a lot of the states in the West, but nationwide, the impact. And I mean, now the federal government's starting to track those. And I think everybody look at those numbers and goes, holy crap, this is bigger than we ever thought. But I mean, it's real important because the businesses that do fishing, guides and hunting guides and, touring and sell equipment, they're dependent on the outdoor lands that the land managers make available to them, and that nonprofits may be building the trails that go out there too for everybody to access to. So it is very intertwined. And then of course, those businesses support the nonprofits through donations and equipment and stuff like that. It's very much commingled, but I think a lot of people just kind of, lose sight of that sometimes, how all these things work together. And it's pretty unique. There's no doubt that the biggest issue facing outdoor recreation, especially in the Pikes Peak region, is the increase in usage. How is PPORA working to I should say, well, number one, are you? And I'm sure you are. And then how are you working to tackle the issue of managing a great increase in usage.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is the biggest issue. And some people might think, well, that's pandemic related, but it started way before the pandemic. And it is something that PPORA has been leaning into since I think I went back to notes from 2017. So it's a big challenge for us. And it's one of those things that needs everybody at the table to tackle. And one of the things we started doing was bringing together planning documents and figuring out, all right, so, what do our land managers have to work with? What are the plans looking like? What are their resources looking like? And trying to lean into those kinds of things. And we may talk about it a little bit more further. But one of the big things that PPR is working on is we are facilitating the Outdoor Pikes Peak initiative through the Colorado Outdoor Regional Partnerships. And that is a planning initiative for conservation and recreation for our region. So leaning into that to try to figure out, what's the future going to look like? If we're already having these kinds of impacts now, and we don't feel like our land managers are properly resourced to manage that, we all need to work together to find some solutions, or we're not going to have the experiences that we all enjoy.
Exactly. And we'll get back to that initiative here in a minute. But, you mentioned the pandemic and increasing usage. Those of us in the community knew that was increasing anyway.
Yeah.
But my guess is, and this is just a guess, I don't think anybody has a solid number, the pandemic probably accelerated thing by a good 10 years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And the land managers will be the first people to tell you that. The numbers that they have are our forest numbers, our state park numbers, even our city park numbers and our county park numbers just skyrocketed. And I think, we haven't gone through a pandemic like this before, so nobody really knew, okay, is it going to fall back to pre-pandemic levels? And it hasn't. And the purchases that people were making during that time are large dollar purchases. So they are planning to enjoy their RV, enjoy their mountain bike, enjoy their fly rods for a long time to come. So these were not short-term kinds of purchases that would make you think, well, they're just going to do this for the short end. And we think that those new people that came into the outdoors during the pandemic, many of them are here to stay. And I think you mentioned government numbers earlier. And the Bureau of Economic Analysis just looked at our 2021 numbers, and we saw substantial growth, even from 2020, which was our big pandemic year, probably. So, so this growth, it's here to stay. We've got a lot of new users, a lot of folks that didn't grow up knowing good outdoor ethics, didn't understand how to work with other users on the trails and in our parks. So we've got some challenges to tackle for sure.
Yeah, when the pandemic kicked, and we've been watching this uptick anyway, and we're already trying to figure out how to manage it, and then things just got blown up. One of the questions I had during that time, and I voiced it in meetings and stuff, was, what's going to happen when we get past this? Are we going to How far are we going to drop? And then you just answer the question, we're really not. I mean, it's probably a little bit of a drop, people who are kind of iffy on it. But a lot of people really did discover the outdoors during that and are staying there. So now we've kind of hit this plateau that we were still thinking we were years down the road to getting to. And now we're like, holy, we gotta get these people out and work with them. So working with that issue, the government agencies are behind the eight ball. And this is not a hit on all our friends at all these government agencies. They are slow to react anyway. It's just especially when we get to our federal agencies. It's just a matter of the bureaucracy, the wheels that turn slowly. They're really behind the eight ball now, I imagine, trying to catch up. What are you seeing with them catching up with the increased usage? Has the government agencies recognized that they're really far behind, and are they really trying to amp up how fast they move to catch up? Yeah,
they definitely are. Both ends. They're aware of it and they're working on it. But as you said, government is slower to react to these things. There's bureaucracy involved, but there's also been some real positive movement. And I think, sitting down with Carl Bauer of our Pikes Peak Ranger District here, I know that he's been getting some funding in to work on some forest health issues, because that's going to impact all of us. There's a new video out, which is pretty exciting, on prescriptive burns, which I think will be necessary to help our recreating and general public understand how important some of these tools are for all of us to enjoy the outdoors in the future. So we're starting to see there's some additional hiring happening, specifically right now on that forest health side, but there's some also recreation hiring happening. It's a little bit smaller. The enforcement side is also a challenge, and I think we've seen that with Gold Camp and Old Stage Road. Some of the challenges we've had there have been in the press lately, and that's an area where our resources are behind the eight ball in a big way. So, and that's a small percentage of people that don't do the right thing. But education doesn't work on those people. Enforcement does.
Right.
And so we really need to step it up there. Other places, you look at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and they've been working on hiring as well. But it's really interesting, this post-pandemic workforce challenge that we're seeing across the board in every industry is affecting our land managers too. And they're having a tough time finding the right pool of people to fill some of these positions that they do want to have filled. So in our city parks, we're really excited that City Council, or at least in the mayor's budget, they approved some additional parks managers or parks
Rangers. Yeah.
Thank you. Park rangers. So I think they are being responsive. I think they're doing what they need to do, but I think public-private cooperation and partnerships is going to be key, because we can't just depend on them coming up with all the solutions. We've got to be there too.
Right. The nonprofits have to do their part, which they've always done, but I think even the nonprofits are feeling a little bit of pressure because they're being asked to do more. And typically they're volunteer-oriented groups and things like that, so they're asked to do more. You're correct about the local ranger district got more law enforcement, which is really an issue, as you've discussed. And those new rangers that the city hired, at least the proposal is they'll have some manner of enforcement capability, which I think, a lot of people talk to people. A lot of the complaints they have is people just, I hate to use, for lack of a better word, running amok and not being good stewards of the land and not being responsible users. And people are like, why am I obeying the rules and these people aren't? Yeah. And you don't want to necessarily go the enforcement route, but like I said, some people, that's all they respond to.
Yeah, it's a both and, really. I mean, you've got to have the education for those that are, like I said, there's so many new people that are recreating and they don't understand leave no trace principles, staying on the trail, going through mud, not around.
Trail etiquette.
Trail etiquette when there's other users who want to enjoy it as well, but they do it differently. So the education piece is really key also. But this enforcement piece has to be there as well. So it really is a both and. Yeah,
it is. It is. And it's good to see that the agencies are responding to that. It's interesting with the workforce issues you mentioned. CPW is doing big hiring. Mm-hmm. They were looking for people on the wildlife side of things. They're wildlife managers. They were really looking for them and park rangers, and they did graduate a pretty significant class of rangers and wildlife managers back in the late summer, but I know that they're still pretty undermanned. I heard about one park that's very busy that normally has 7 or 8 rangers, and they had 1. And that's not nearly enough to do anything. So if you're looking for a job, if you're listening and you're looking for a job and you're interested in being a park ranger or a game warden, which we call them wildlife managers here in Colorado, those jobs are available out there. They are. And they certainly are.
Yeah, and we actually host an outdoor industry job board on our website for exactly that reason, for people that want to work in the outdoors, not sure what they want to do. You can come to the job board and see a number of different opportunities.
There you go. There you go. If I was a younger man, I would consider it, but those days are long past for me. So you talked about this initiative.
Yeah.
So tell us about this initiative that you've started at PPORA and what it does
Sure.
and what its goal is.
Yeah, the timing of it was just great because, like I said, we were already working on sustainable outdoor recreation and tourism and bringing people together. We were looking at other models of where management has been done maybe a little bit differently to see what might work for our area. And then Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Great Outdoors Colorado, and other partners that are a part of what's called the Colorado Outdoor Partnership got together and said, you know what, we would really love local communities to be able to do some planning and determine their own priorities for conservation and recreation because every community is different. And they said, well, let's put together what that could look like, some funding, and let's launch this thing. Governor Polis made an executive order to launch this initiative. It's the Colorado Outdoor Regional Partnerships Initiative in 2021. They launched it, they funded it, again, funding through GOCO and CPW jointly. And we were part of that initial grant funding last year and then got our second grant funding for the next phase for the next 2 years just this summer. So this initiative is funding coalitions such as PPORA across the state who are really leaning in on the conservation and recreation needs of their communities. And they're doing this planning work. And then the goal is for each of these coalitions across the state, their plans that they come up with and the principles and priorities to bubble up into a statewide outdoor recreation, conservation, and climate resiliency plan by 2026. So that's the ultimate goal of this.
So where does this fall? We already have the Office of Economic Development that exists at state level for the outdoor recreation industry. How does this fall with them? So the OREC office is one of the Colorado Outdoor Partnership partners. Okay.
So they're participating in it as well. In fact, Connor is on the executive committee, I believe. So they are definitely involved in this. They want to see these coalitions be successful. And then they have their own separate granting at the OREC level, which can support different communities' outdoor recreation needs. So they are a partner in it. But this is coming strictly from Colorado Outdoor Partnership as a whole, which is a larger body, statewide body.
So is the idea of this with these regional groups, is the idea that when a state agency like Colorado Parks and Wildlife is looking to where they're going to build a park or where they're going to maybe develop a state wildlife area or something like that, is it more that now they have some local input that helps them guide what they're end up doing at the state, at the bigger level? Is that the idea here?
Yeah, and the goal is for this to unleash some funding for these priorities. So it's not just let's have a great plan, identify them, and put the plan on the shelf. The goal is for big funders like CPW and GOCO to have some guidance in a local area, in a region, so that they're not doing a whack-a-mole where someone, submits a project and they're like, well, it sounds like a good project. They have no idea how it fits into the bigger picture of that region. They want this process to help them have that bigger framework so that when they are approached, they can say, well, how does that fit into what this community has established that's really important to them? It's a bit of an alignment tool for funders to be able to say, this makes sense, this advances this community's goals that have been established through this process. And this process is, it's a multifaceted process. It's like I said,
it sounds very complex.
It is, but it's and each of us are doing it a little bit differently. So again, each region, each area is unique, and we're all approaching it a little bit differently. For us, we wanted to, before we started with something new, this is a community that has a lot of collaboration, that has already done a lot of great work. And so we didn't want to start from zero. We didn't feel like we were. So the first part of this was gathering what has been done, what are the priorities, what hasn't been achieved yet, but the community and the stakeholders have already decided this is important. What are our big needs of our land managers, and how do these things fit in? So our whole first year, and we're still doing this, is gathering data, gathering input from this community to lay the groundwork. So we look at them as building blocks for this plan. And we're at a point now where we're going to be going out to the community and sharing what we've heard, find out if the community resonates with that, and to hear what they have on their hearts and minds that's important to them when they think of the places that they want to enjoy here in the Pikes Peak region.
So I'm imagining that if you're at the GOCO level, and that's Great Outdoors Colorado, and they're the ones who distribute lottery money, the exact opposite, that if they get a grant request from a specific region, that may be the only people they hear from in that region, and they may be inclined to fund it. But now with this regional cooperation, they may go back and say, well, how does this fit into what you all are doing there? And is there maybe somebody else who can also use some of this? And how are you working together? That's kind of what I see it. So it does help them look at the broader picture, except like you said, whack-a-mole. This one group pops up and says, I need money. Well, that's the only people we've heard from. We'll give them money, but now let's see how it works with everybody else. I kind of like that approach because as we've learned here, you can go from almost literally walk from a city park to a county park to a state park. And in a way, you're going to cross through some federal lands. And for the average user, not only do they not know the difference, but to be honest with you, they don't care.
Yeah, no.
They just want to go out and have a good time. They really need some coordination when they're working to, I'm building a park, you're building a park, I'm going to build a trail. Well, let's make sure all these things mesh up. And of course, that takes money, and that's where we go back to how is GOCO money and lottery money spent? Yeah. Is it better to spend it when you all four of your agencies get together and have a plan instead of you're doing one thing and you're doing something else and maybe it's not all working together?
Exactly right. And the other piece of it, and you've kind of hinted towards that, is more of a landscape view. So you're looking more broadly, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially when you think about the different types of users in our outdoors and what they want to experience, there may be if you're only looking at a square piece of property, that might not be well suited for certain types of outdoor use. But if you look at a landscape view, going back to that, so there are winners and losers if you look at a small little area. Some people may want to have it for a particular purpose, but that means everybody else doesn't get it for their purpose. If you look at a landscape view, you can say, well, where are these things appropriate? And for example, one of the things that we're looking at is in the Cripple Creek Victor area, there's Newmont Mine. Well, Newmont Mine has a moonscape. Definitely not an area where you have a lot of, you're not going to replant vegetation and have a lot of trees, that kind of thing. But in their reclamation, which they will eventually be doing, would that be appropriate for motorized use? Well, that might be a great place to have motorized recreation, where other places it might not be appropriate. So I think when you look at a landscape view, you can look at a bigger picture and say, what does this region want? What does the community want? What do users of the outdoors want? What kind of experiences? And then where are those appropriate? Where aren't they appropriate? And
right.
One piece that we're working on right now is a multi-layered mapping tool that will help us determine exactly that. It's bringing in wildlife corridors, special species. It's bringing in climate resiliency data. And also, where is our outdoor infrastructure today? Where are the parking lots? Where can you trailer your horses? Where can't you? Where do we have bathrooms and campgrounds, et cetera? And bringing all of that together to be able to hopefully serve as a tool for making better decisions, making some data-based, science-based, informed decisions on where and what is appropriate in our landscape.
What has the reaction been of the various land managers to this initiative? Is everybody pretty much, I mean, I come from a public safety background, and there were a few things more territorial than a police chief or a fire chief. But I'm thinking that land managers are probably, I'm hoping, a little more flexible. How has their reaction been to putting this together?
I would say overall, very much wanting to be involved, wanting to see this happen. I will say there's definitely some skepticism, some wait and see. And I think that's because coming from, a group of this big tent, I think there's fear that all we want to do is put in a whole bunch of trails and put in a whole bunch new outdoor recreation, where land managers have to balance the land as well and the needs of the land, and it's already being impacted so greatly. So I think there's some fear on some part that this is just going to be a recreation plan, but that is not what this is designed to be. It is not our marching orders from CPW and GOCO, and it's not what we want. We want balance. We really do, and we want to look at the future, and we want great outdoor experiences for the person that just want that backcountry, quiet, hardly any roads, trails, more wilderness experience, and the person that wants to use their motorcycle on a Captain Jack's trail. So there's a balance between these uses. There's a balance between what the land needs, and again, having a healthy forest. And so what we're trying to do is bring in all of that data and information to plan very thoughtfully towards the future. But balance is really the key to this. And
that sounds like, what everybody really should want anyway. I mean, there's land that's conserved so that it has no uses. I mean, it's an old ranch, and they don't want to sell it. They don't want it to become developed, but they also maybe aren't keen on hiking and camping, but they want to leave it as preserved as it is. And that obviously fits into this plan of let's make sure that we're using the land the way that particular owner or land manager wants it to be used. It's kind of what I was going after, because I could see some land managers going, yeah, I don't mind the new trails, but I'm gonna have to pay to maintain those. You want to build new parking lots, fine, but I'm gonna have to pay to maintain those, hire people, and this is fine to do this, but it's going to impact how I do my end of things. So that's why I was curious about that part of it.
And a big focus of this is taking care of what we already have. Right. It really is. We have so much already. I think people don't realize how many trails we have, how many parks we have, how many opportunities to get out and enjoy, because often we only think of those really popular places. And those really popular places are getting overrun. But there are so many other places to go and enjoy and explore. And I think we all want to have those experiences, but we have to take care of what we already have. And like I mentioned, back to our land managers, and they are under-resourced right now. They are completely under-resourced. And it takes advocacy on our part to help that. It also takes volunteerism on all of our part. It takes doing our own good outdoor ethics when we're out there to take care of things. I mean, I sat with one of our Forest Service personnel a couple of weeks ago and heard about how much of their time and energy and money is devoted to getting rid of dumped vehicles in our forest.
Yep.
I mean, that's not what they were hired to do. That's not what we want them doing. And yet those kinds of things are happening on our national forests. So it's a complicated situation, but we have to take care of what we already have. And that's a big part of this initiative, is figuring out those management models, how to come alongside, how to partner, how to bring additional funding in, so that we're really addressing the things that need to be addressed with what we already have before we start looking at some additional use and development.
One of the things you mentioned was the Forest Service having to get rid of abandoned cars.
Yeah.
Some years ago, I did an article with the then ranger for our district here, and it was because I had found a it came up because I had found what looked like a homeless camp on one of the more popular trails, reported it, they went and took care of it. And then it came to light of how much time and money they were spending and manpower to clean those places up, which contain hazardous materials. And they're not hazmat techs. They're not. They were delving into stuff by necessity, and thankfully they were doing it, but that they were untrained, unequipped, unprepared to do, and understaffed to do. And that followed with some actions that seemed to have kind of pushed that back a little bit. But yeah, you talk about how they're faced with all these new challenges. Yeah. And not only do they need the resources, the manpower to do it, as we know, they're all undermanned, but they need equipment that they've typically have not had to use.
Yeah.
And there are some partners out there. Focus on the Forest done a great job with helping them clean up, in the Teller County side of things up in the forest, but they need a lot of partners like that. But they also need equipment and training that they've never had. That's never been the Forest Service's job to do.
Right.
That's the weird part about it. It's like we don't know what we're doing here.
Well, and
somebody's got to tell us how to do this.
Yeah, when they decided to be a forest ranger, that certainly wasn't part of the job description.
Yeah.
I've talked to Oscar before he left, and some of the challenges he was seeing dealing with marijuana grows, homeless camps, the situation they were seeing on the forest were things that we never experienced before. So they're definitely dealing with, like you said, new challenges. And we're in a new landscape where, again, it matters to bring everybody together to the table to work on these things, and that's really what PPORA is trying to do.
Okay, so with this initiative, this Pikes Peak initiative, how does the public get involved in that? How does the person listening to this podcast who's not a land manager, not a park ranger, not a forest ranger, how do they get involved in this?
Well, we're really excited to let everybody know that we are opening up some listening sessions that are going to be taking place in January. So the third week in January, the week of the 23rd, we have listening sessions in El Paso County, Fremont County, and Teller County. And these will not just be in-person listening sessions, but we're in a new world, so we're offering virtual sessions as well. So if people want to just sign in online, hear what's going on with the initiative, and provide their feedback. It's really important that we know, all of our land managers, this is an important step to anything they do, is this public engagement. So we're helping with that to learn what's really important to you and to your experience. How do you enjoy the outdoors, and how do you want to in the future? So to be engaged and come to those is going to be really important. We established a website. It is outdoorpikespeakinitiative.org, or you could go to ppora.org's website, and there's a tab for it there. And there we have lots of FAQs there. We explain our vision, our mission, what this is all about, and then how to get involved. And there's a feedback form there as well. So you can give us your direct feedback, and there will be other ways to get involved in the future, but those are just a couple of ways right now.
And I can say, by having taken part in similar things, when there was the big initiative of Waldo Canyon and how we're going to do that in the Bear Creek area, when it became evident that we had to do something to protect the fish population in Bear Creek, that it's easy for people to become skeptical of government, but they do look at all these feedback that they get. Now, not everybody's going to get what they want. That's just the way it is. Not everybody can get everything you want, so people may be disappointed that what they wanted didn't show up, but they do look at all the feedback, and from there kind of try to make that, they have their own parameters, but how can we get what the public wants and the parameters that we're constrained to, and how can we get these things to work together? So if you don't participate and tell these agencies what they want, they're really kind of we're going to go what we normally do, and it may or may not work, but if we hear from you, then we can get these things to work a little better. Yeah,
it really does make a difference. I mean, they are, one of the things I continually have been hearing, not just from the Forest Service, but CPW certainly, and our local government as well, they want to know what experience you want. They are public servants, and so this is an opportunity for you to provide that feedback. So we really hope people will take advantage of that.
Great. So we started this off by talking about we're in the Pikes Peak Give season, and it runs to the end of December. And PPRA is part of that. So tell us why people, make your claim, why people should give during this time to PPRA.
Yeah, we have a unique role in this community, and that is, as I've mentioned many times, bringing people together to solve these problems, and to also elevate the value of the outdoors so that you guys can continue to have these experiences. So when you give to PPRA, that is what you're helping us do, is bring people together to make a difference here in our local lands.
Great. And we'll have those links to your website on the show notes. So if you're listening to this either on the website or on your favorite podcast player, there'll be a link there that you can copy and paste or click on and go to all those. But Becky, I want to thank you for spending the time this morning.
Thanks, Bob.
I know you're super busy. I don't know how you keep. I had Susan Davies on the podcast the other day, and I don't know how she keeps up with everything and how you all do
friend.
it. Yeah, you guys all do a great job. I really appreciate it. But thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today.
Happy to do it, Bob. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Yep. And everybody, thanks for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.